So I really don't want to make this video because the drama and the toxicity from a certain sector of Seahawks fans that make their way over on videos on this subject really just overall taints the discussion and makes it really hard to have a genuine conversation about this topic. And we all know what we're talking about here. It's Russell Wilson once again in the news. And once again, it is one of his former Seahawk teammates going out there and really airing out his personal beef and personal displeasures with Russell Wilson on a national media scale. And in my opinion, letting that slip into their evaluation of the player. And oh man, it's tough. It's really tough because you understand where guys such as Richard Sherman and in this case legendary Seahawks linebacker KJ Wright are coming from, because Russell Wilson, if you look back on reports from his relationship with his teammates, especially during his time in Seattle, it was very tough for him to be a relatable guy. He always got, it felt like, special treatment at times. He had his secretary take phone calls for him whenever his teammates wanted to get in touch with him, allegedly, or at least that's what Richard Sherman claims. Marshawn Lynch, he didn't exactly confirm that, contrary to what the media wanted to run off with that narrative there. But at the same time, I mean, Richard Sherman and KJ Wright and other members of the Seattle Seahawks, there's clearly some personal displeasure there with Russell Wilson, especially players who were members of the Legion of Boom on the defensive side of the ball. Quite frankly, the only defensive player that was on the Seattle Seahawks for their legendary Super Bowl runs that still, I feel like, has a decent relationship with Russell Wilson is Bobby Wagner. But KJ Wright was recently on Good Morning Football, and he was asked about his former Seahawk teammate, and he was asked how he feels about his prospects moving forward and how he feels about the Seattle Seahawks getting what they got in this trade. Now let's take a listen to what KJ Wright has to say here.
When I look at this Russell Wilson situation, this could potentially go down as the biggest trade heist in NFL history. We're talking 2 first-round picks. We're talking 2 second-round picks. We're talking a bunch of good football players, Noah Fant, Shelby Harris, Drew Lock. And we're talking about they gave this man 5 years and paid him a lot of money to say, you are our guy for the next 5 years. Russell Wilson, we're putting all our eggs into you, and all they've gotten so far is 5 wins and a fired head coach. And so right now, this is looking very scary. This is looking ugly. And the Seahawks, they hit on their draft picks.
They did.
They got Tariq Woolen. They got 2 offensive linemen that started as rookies. They got the best wide receiver in this draft, in Jackson Smith and Jigba and Devin Witherspoon. They are hitting. They are winning right now. And so for Russell, like you said, his legacy is on the line. John Snyder and Coach Harrell are looking like geniuses right now. And so it's not over. It's just 1 year. But right now, it's looking pretty scary. And so I need Russ to get this figured out this year because, like you said, his legacy is definitely on the line.
All right, so you cannot tell me that there's not some bias there. Now, I want to actually go over and review what the Seahawks got in the Russell Wilson trade, because now with all the players being selected from the draft picks that they got, the trade is officially complete. Now, yes, the Seattle Seahawks have drafted really well, but not all of the players that they got in the Russell Wilson trade are proven commodities just yet. Now, that's not saying that they won't be, but at the same time, I feel like what the Seahawks got, yeah, it was a lot in terms of volume, but as of right now, there's only, in my opinion, 2 really solid players on this list, and the rest are just kind of unproven commodities at this point in time, or proven commodities that are just not very good or not long-term contributors for the Seattle Seahawks. I really like what the Seattle Seahawks have done. Hats off to them for doing really well in the draft the past couple of years. I have a lot of respect for the Seattle Seahawks organization. They did really well moving off from Russell Wilson, in my opinion, at what was the right time. Obviously, that relationship was completely fractured, and they did well with what they got in return. Obviously, I mean, it certainly, the results here in Denver were not what were expected going forward, but with Nathaniel Hackett now out of the building and Sean Payton now in the building, I really feel like Russell Wilson has a chance to look a lot closer to the Russell Wilson that we saw for 10 years in Seattle. Sure, age is catching up with him and his mobility is starting to decline a bit, but at the same time, he's still one of the best deep ball throwers in the NFL, and Russell Wilson, I feel like, is going to really thrive in the Sean Payton offense. Now, let's go ahead and review the trade here and go over exactly what the Seattle Seahawks got. I'll go ahead and bring that in here via a window capture. Shout out to my man Zach Stevens over at DNVR for this tweet here. So, the Denver Broncos received Russell Wilson and Ioma Uwazurike, who was drafted in the 2022 fourth round. And then the Seahawks, Charles Cross, really good player. That said, though, he did start to fall off a little bit in the back half of the 2022 season, and I really feel like he got outshined by his fellow rookie tackle Abraham Lucas. But that said, Charles Cross still the anchor stone for the left side of their offensive line. Really good player there. Definitely. Denver, obviously, we have Garrett Bowles, so we probably would not have taken Charles Cross with that pick. But Garrett Bowles, Charles Cross, you pick your player there, in my opinion. As of right now, I don't know if there's really that big of a gap between Charles Cross and a healthy Garrett Bowles at the top of his game. Now, Devin Witherspoon, obviously drafted in the first round this year by the Seahawks. He's one of the top corner prospects in this year's draft. The Seahawks have an embarrassment of riches at the cornerback position. They've got Tariq Woolen, who did have some surgery recently, I believe on his foot, so he may be sidelined potentially into training camp. They've also got Kobe Bryant, who's entering his second year. I really, really like the Seahawks cornerback unit, and adding Devin Witherspoon in the mix, that's a really good piece there. So that one certainly stings. That's a good player. But aside from that, man, I mean, Boye Mafe, he's got potential to be good. Derek Hall, same deal, but they're unproven commodities for the most part as of right now. Same goes for Tyreek Smith, who was drafted last year in the 5th round. Then there's Noah Fant, who, in my opinion, has kind of reached his ceiling in the NFL. He's a tight end, too. He's not the Seahawks starting tight end. He got outshined, in my opinion, by guys such as Colby Parkinson, and even Will Dissly looked better than Noah Fant last year. So Noah Fant has really good speed. I feel like is a really good niche player for the Seahawks, but much like here in Denver, he's never really reached what he could have become when he was drafted 20th overall in 2019 by the Denver Broncos. Now, Shelby Harris, of course, is not even on the team anymore. He's currently a free agent. He was cut this offseason by the Seahawks, so he's not even on the team anymore. And then Drew Lock obviously couldn't beat out Geno Smith, and obviously we saw why. Geno Smith looked awesome last year. But Drew Lock, he's the Seahawks' backup quarterback, and unless something drastic happens to Geno Smith, either with an injury or his play just completely falls off a cliff, I don't feel like Drew Lock will see the field for the Seahawks. He literally did not see the field at all, save for 2 preseason games last year for the Seahawks. So at the end of the day, man, there's 2 good players that the Seahawks got in this trade, and aside from that, a lot of unproven commodities and just a lot of crapshoots. So Russell Wilson, here's hoping that he'll be able to step it up, and I really like Ioma Uwazurike, and the Broncos seem to like him enough to give him an opportunity to maybe get some snaps in year 2. He barely saw the field as a rookie, but I really like his potential. So also another one of those unproven commodities. Yeah, the Seahawks they did get a lot in terms of volume, and they got a couple of really good blue chip players out of this trade. But as of right now, to say that this is the biggest trade heist in NFL history is a complete and utter farce, because the Seahawks, with their own draft picks, hit with guys such as Jackson Smith-Njigba, Tariq Woolen, all those guys that KJ Wright mentioned. It was with Charles Cross and Devin Witherspoon. Those were really the two big names that the Seahawks acquired with those Denver picks. Now, to compare this trade to, say, the Herschel Walker trade, that's just complete and utter BS in my opinion. There's no way that this trade will go down with the Herschel Walker trade. In fact, I don't feel like this will even go down as the worst quarterback trade from last season. Deshaun Watson looked like complete crap for the Cleveland Browns last year. He did not look good at all. He was out of football for a year and a half. I'm not going to go into why, obviously. But Deshaun Watson looked horrible, and the Cleveland Browns not only gave up more draft capital for him, they gave him a fully guaranteed contract. At least the Broncos have a somewhat realistic way out of the Russell Wilson deal, especially if ownership is willing to dip into their pockets and fork out the cash. Now, here's hoping we don't have to get to that point, but with Deshaun Watson, man, I mean, he did not look good last year, and the Cleveland Browns are married to him for, I believe, 7 years or some crap, because they extended him before his extension with the Houston Texans had even kicked in. So, I don't know, man. We're trying to sit here and pretend that Russell Wilson was the worst quarterback trade of all time and potentially the worst NFL trade of all time. That's a complete and utter pile of crap. Deshaun Watson has potential to go down there with Herschel Walker, in my opinion, especially because of all the off-the-field baggage. We don't have that associated off-the-field baggage with Russell Wilson. Yeah, he's corny and a little bit cringy, but when you're winning, that generally passes off well. It did for 10 years when Russell Wilson was in Seattle, and now all of a sudden we're going to pretend that Russell Wilson is one of the most hated figures in the NFL. I mean, we see all this recency bias now about how Russell Wilson was never a good player for the Seattle Seahawks, and he was carried by the Legion of Boom and carried by Marshawn Lynch. Yeah, maybe that was true early in his career when they won the Super Bowl against the Denver Broncos. But later in his career, especially from 2015 to 2020, Russell Wilson was the reason why the Seattle Seahawks were relevant. Russell Wilson was an MVP candidate that did not get the love and respect that he deserved. Russell Wilson was being talked about with Patrick Mahomes as the best quarterback in the NFL from 2018 to 2020. I'm sorry, man, to sit here and say that Russell Wilson was never a good player for the Seattle Seahawks, and now you got the Seahawks going out and giving his number to Artie effing Burns. I'm sorry, I'm going on a bit of a rant here, but I understand Russell Wilson didn't play well last year. I'll be the first one to go out there and say that. But to disrespect him for all the stuff that he did before he got to Denver, that's ridiculous. And it really pisses me off that the Seahawks fan base has done that. Because Russell Wilson was the best quarterback that has ever played for that franchise. And Seattle may have things pretty good right now with Geno Smith, but do we really think that Geno Smith is the long-term answer to the Seahawks quarterback issues? I don't think he is. Do we really know if Geno's going to be able to sustain this high level of play? I think he will, but what if he doesn't? What if he doesn't? Then Seattle might be in a bit of trouble here. So to go ahead and sit here and say that this was the biggest quarterback trade heist of all time or the biggest trade heist of all time, that's just not true, man. You cannot go here and compare that to the Herschel Walker trade. And it really, really ticks me off that Russell Wilson's former teammates who have gotten in the media are allowing their personal bias and displeasure against Russell Wilson to affect their analysis of him from a media perspective. Now, I am technically a part of the media, but I want to make very clear that I am also a fan, and I'm going to let some of my bias come in. That's probably why I'm never going to be a credentialed member of the media, because I will never be able to completely be subjective. But members of the media that are on a national level, they get paid the big bucks to be subjective. And sure, Richard Sherman, he can go on his own podcast and he can talk all the crap he wants about Russell Wilson. But I feel like KJ Wright going on Good Morning Football, a program that really should be subjective, is one of the highest viewed football programs in all of sports. And we've got guys like Kyle Brandt talking crap about Russell Wilson. Now KJ Wright coming in here and just really, you can criticize all you want his play on the field, but at the end of the day, when you take it and let it get personal like this, that's when I lose a lot of respect for you as an analyst and a member of the media. All right, guys, I'm going to step off the soapbox here. I appreciate you guys tuning in for my little rant here. So, how do you guys feel about KJ Wright going on Good Morning Football and saying all this about Russell Wilson? Drop those comments down below, guys. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Be sure to leave a like on this video as well as subscribe and ring the bell so these videos appear in your notification feed. I'd really appreciate it, guys. Those are two free and easy ways to share your support. It helps tell YouTube's algorithm to push us out to fellow members of Broncos country just like you and me. And until next time, guys, this has been another episode of Denver Broncos Syndicate. I am your host, Gage Madrid, saying peace out.